Um, I'd really like to appreciate your presence here. Thanks for coming along. So today we're going to talk about Untapped Potential, the challenges and experiences of Kenyan female chefs in the Kenyan hospitality industry. So, introduction, I'll tell you a little story about me. Okay, I'm involved in training chefs, so I have had a bit of experience, and that's why I would say whenever we go for student internship follow-ups, I realize that they are not chefs, especially the female chefs. They're not present there. And then I looked for information from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, but what happened is the information was not very clear. You could not tell if the chefs were female or were male. So all the information which was there was about chefs. So I went back to the college that is mandated by the government to train chefs, and that is Kenya Hotel College, where I'm privileged to be working. And this is the information that I got. Since the college's inception in 1975, there's a trend. They've always trained like 50-50. If you look at the numbers, this is 793 versus 770. So we ask ourselves, where do the female chefs go at the end of the day? I went to the literature, and we found out that there are fewer female chefs at the top, and some of the reasons was given there. There's burnout. And this particular study by Murray said that there's need for investigation further to tell us what could be the reason behind female chefs missing at the top. The next study by Harris was done, and then we found out that there's a problem like work-life balance. There was also feminist movement, and feminist movement was necessarily because there was a thought that cooking as a career was not good enough for the female. So they needed something better, maybe like engineering. So they're not encouraging females to go for cooking career. And another study by Druckmann, cooking was not cool. Yeah, so females were not necessarily encouraged to be in this cooking career. This next study was by Fungai, and that was done in Zimbabwe. There's also work-life balance. There was low pay, slow adaptation of technology, occupational hazards, and cultural stereotypes. After that, we developed a research question, and our research question was, do the challenges experienced by Kenyan female chefs influence their career progression in the hospitality industry? After that, I looked at the objectives of my study, and the first objective was to establish the challenges that they face. The next objective was to identify the effects of these challenges, to identify the effect of the challenges on their progression. I looked at my research methods, and we're looking at the design. So the background of the researcher, as I told you, I'm involved in training and working with female chefs. It's not been, they are good enough, they're able to perform, but you ask yourself, what are these that are constraining them? They're not able to make it to the top. And if you work with them, you realize that they're smart. Some of the stories that I got from the interviews, they're very smart people, they're creative, and that is what this profession needs. I looked at Afrocentricity, and that is actually the ontology, the world view, which is based on African view. So in this case, we looked at things like what are the roles of female in the African context? What are the roles? What are they required to do in the society? Due to that, I looked at African feminism theory, which would guide me into doing my analysis. And then we looked at the qualitative approach through African storytelling paradigm. I looked at my samples, and the sample size was 15, where I was looking at Kenyan chefs. The recruitment methods, I looked at 10 Kenyan female chefs, and then I looked at 5 male executive chefs. The reason as to why I incorporated male executive chefs was, one, because they're the people that are involved in employment of the chefs. They're the bosses. So I wanted to know, why are they not employing enough female chefs in the industry? Or why are they not given that chance to explore their talent? I looked at purposive sampling because I really knew what I wanted. So I had a target. For example, as I've told you, I was looking at executive male chefs. And then I looked at also referrals. So I talked to some of the female chefs who gave me referrals into getting to other female chefs, because it was not easy to know exactly where they are. So research methods, I did interviews, and there were personal face-to-face interviews. I had a demographic form which I requested the participants to fill so that I could get information based on their job title, age, gender, and so on. Then the interviews were audio taped and recorded. Then I also used footnotes. For example, I've told you I was working on an African paradigm of storytelling. So I needed footnotes that would help me to construct things to do with the setting of the story, how it was carried on. So my data analysis will be like this. I'm looking at the female chefs. They've told me the stories are already recorded. And then African feminist theory. So the reason as to why I chose African feminist theory was, one, African feminist theory, one, it looks at gender. It addresses the issue of gender. It addresses the issue of class and race. And apart from that, African feminist theory does not encourage the dichotomy of the gender, male versus female. It encourages male and female to work together. Then I looked at oral narrative techniques. So here, what we're looking for is, we're looking at the story. What is the story about? Who is telling the story? What are they telling about other people involved in that story? Then I looked at Gila's motif, Gila's peer motif. And the Gila's peer motif is a story about some beautiful lady who went for a beautician. And out of that, they came back, and this lady looked very beautiful compared to others. And the peers were not very, happy about the lady. So what happened is they looked for ways and avenues of bringing this lady down. And I'm using this as an analogy in this story of the female chefs. We are looking at a situation whereby we have male chefs, they're making it in the industry, but we argue that the jealousness in them has made it a way that female chefs face challenges. And because of these challenges, they're not able to make it in the industry. Secondly, if we're looking at Afrocentricity, it tells us that, one, female chefs were, or rather, women in Africa, they're mostly concentrated in the domestic quarters. Cooking is one thing that they train as early as age 4. So we're looking at it, why does it come to the industry and these people, they're not able to make it, especially if they're trained as early as 4 years old. Why is it that in the industry they're not able to make it? So that's why I used the Gila's peer motif. And Gila's peer motif also will help us later on in analysis, where we're going to look at, we have a storyline that is going to help us to plot these challenges and see how it affects the women. Through that, we looked at legends, and we're arguing out that today in this world, the contemporary narrator considered a legend as not those old stories which we only assume people lived. Gila's legends are people that are living within us today, and they're doing things that are there that we reckon with. We're looking at proverbs, and next we're looking at dialogue, and then we're looking at repetition. We also look at metaphors, And then lastly, we are going to look at narrative within a narrative. Narrative within a narrative, we are looking at other people's stories and making it in one. For example, we have 15 participants, but we are going to make it as a female chef story. So let's look at our findings. So using the demographic form, I was able to derive this. So we're looking at Mambo, and these are pseudonyms. They're not real names. So you can see female chefs and male chefs. And next, I'm going to share with you some of the stories that I found out. For example, in the industry, there's sexual harassment. Like I told you, the chef in Masai Mara was too much with me. I had to ask for transfer. He wanted to, so he can promote me, but God was with me. When I refused, he started harassing me. That was told by Tasha. Next, there's a stigmatization where women, or rather the industry is seen as loose, and women associated with the hospitality industry in Kenya, they're seen to be loose. So it discourages people from, especially the female, from taking their career in the industry. Cultural stereotypes. There's Amanda, and Amanda is telling us a story whereby she arrived home late, and there's this relatives who visited. And at that time, the relative was like, which kind of a woman comes home at midnight? Domestic violence. We're looking at a story by Tasha, and Tasha is saying that there's a time, working at late night, there's a time then the husband was not very happy with her, and they had an argument. They had to separate for 2 years. We're looking at it as emotional violence, not physical. Next, we are looking at racism, and Shiro is telling us about a story of an American chef who would compare the skin color. Like he would put a hand and ask you, can you see the difference? Something that is very obvious. Work-life balance, as we said, there's this split shift. It works from maybe 9:30, but according to Shiro, in their company, it works from 10. So it's supposed to go until 2, then you break, you come back at 6, then work from 6 up to 10. But she says, depending on the situation, sometimes you don't have a break, so you work throughout. And for a parent, it's not easy. Intimidation. We're looking at a story by Maya. Maya was telling us a story whereby she was not free with the chef. She could not tell the chef that she was pregnant, so she could not get permission to go for medical. At the end of the day, when she finally went, there was already a problem, and the pregnancy was not viable anymore. Insecurities. Security is a major problem back at home. So sometimes when you work late at night, it's not easy for the female person to work at night. Again, you imagine yourself somewhere in the corner, it's dark, it's not easy for you. What next with my study? So this is what I'm looking at, and as I told you, looking at the Gila's PM motif, we have a storyline, and we have 4 storylines, or somebody can call it a plot. So we're looking at initiation into the culinary career. And I'm going to look at what are the challenges that they face when they're introduced into the career. For instance, we've looked at sexual harassment. Some of the stories allude to sexual harassment as young as when they are in the career, they're doing the internship, they're harassed. We're looking at number 2, job hunt. And this is the time when you're looking for a job. What kind of things do they face? What are the challenges? Some of them face discrimination and so on. Storyline 3, we're looking at kitchen experience, and this is the whole thing. So we're looking at what is there that causes them not progress in the industry when they're working already. Number 4, we're looking at I love my job, and I love my job is whereby now they're contented with what they're doing. But again, we're asking ourselves, what are the kind of challenges that they face? For example, there's a story about, if I remember, it should be Saumo, was telling me a story about she wants to start a business. But again, obtaining loans is not easy for them. These are my references and acknowledgement, New Zealand Development Scholarship, and my supervisors, Sheila Muni and Camille, she's there, smiling, and Auckland University of Technology Committee. questions,
okay,
if you don't mind.
So we have 5 minutes?
Yes, please.
Can you just go back and talk to me about African feminism a little bit more, please? Just paint a picture for me.
Here? Okay. So the reason as to why I looked at African feminist theory is because there's a study that was done by, if I can remember the name, is it Alnovo? She is responsible for managing a consultant company in the US. And she talked about intersectionality, if I can say so. So she advises that in studies such as gender, there are certain things that we need to look at. For example, we need to look at nationality. We need to look at another perspective of looking at things, not from the normal way of looking at things. So looking at African feminist theory is different from the Western feminist theory. For one, as I've told you, the Western feminist theory does not talk about issues to deal with race. And Halnovo, in her study, she argues that when women of color were struggling with issues of gender and issues of race, Western women were only struggling with issue of what? Issue of gender. So again, we look at it in a way that women of color are more of a burden, yes? So this theory would really fit, rather than looking at it from the Western feminist theory. Did I answer your question?
So then I thought about it as in how does African feminist theory then embrace the issue of the power relationship between men and women, especially in the research space?
Oh, good. So African feminist theory, as I told you before, it does not encourage dichotomy of gender, like men vis-a-vis women. And I've told you about that story of Alnovo. She gives 4 reasons, and one of the reasons as to why she's saying that we should look at it from a different point of view, from a different worldview, she says that men are not necessarily the problem. She compares a situation whereby a white lady and a lady of color working with a male, or rather a white male in the same company, who is more disadvantaged. Yeah. So she's saying that it's not necessarily men who are the problem. The problem is the general system. So the best way to look at it, we need to look at the organization first. What is the organization doing to encourage women to be working? Number 2, we look at the nation. For example, what are the issues that government has put in place to encourage women to be working? And that's why we're looking at Kenya and not any other country else. Did I answer your question?
It's not, yeah, thank you.
Any other question? Oh, sure. No worries.
Then I was going to say to you, in your reading and the literature that you've looked at, have you also looked at if similarities are happening globally in different spheres? Is it just an African issue, or is this an issue for women in the chef area worldwide?
So I told you about this research that I did look at, sorry. So these are some of the research which, so to speak, they concentrate on female chefs in the industry. If we don't look at gender as a whole, female chefs in the industry. And they're specifically hospitality-based. And this is what I was looking at. And if you look at it, these are some of the issues they're coming out with. These are the findings. So as I've told you, Murray Gibson, they're the first people that said, okay, there's need to investigate further if the reality is that there are few female chefs at the top. Yeah. So later on, there's a study in 2010 by Harris, And they're looking at issues to deal with work-life balance. For example, if you look at the kind of work that women do at home, or they are expected to do at home, vis-a-vis the kind of work they still do at work, you see that they're more of a burden. By the time you're already in the industry, you feel that you've done so much. In the morning, you need to prepare your kids to go to school. Probably in certain areas, like in Kenya, I believe, I don't know whether things have changed, you need even to take care of your husband at the same time, maybe to iron the clothes. So by the time you're reporting to work, already you feel exhausted. Yeah.
Thank you, Charles.
Sorry, just a minute.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
That was great, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Give a applause for Charles. Charles, on behalf of UPC, thank you.
Oh, thank you.